So now we're going to get into predictions. We're going to start off with the Offensive Player of the Year. Some of the candidates that I have, I think the top candidates, number one is Antonio Brown. Number two, obviously Aaron Rodgers. And then number three, I'd say Tom Brady. What are your thoughts on that? And who are some other players who could potentially be Offensive Player of the Year?
I would say Todd Gurley is a good one again.
Yeah, Todd Gurley. Yeah.
And let's see, I'm thinking. My dark horse is Cam Newton.
Cam Newton?
I could see him having a good season.
All right, Defensive Player of the Year. First one, we talked about him already, Aaron Donald. Chandler Jones, who led the league in sacks, and I expect him to have another good season. And then this is a gutsy one, and I believe he's starting to become the next Richard Sherman. Mayor of Duval City, Jalen Ramsey. So, what are your thoughts on that, and who are some other defensive players?
I would say Luke Kuechly is a good option, but I would go with Chandler Jones.
Chandler Jones, yeah. Now we're moving into the rookie awards. So offensive rookies. My top pick is Saquon Barkley from the Giants, Calvin Ridley for the Falcons, and then this is a bit of a long shot, but Josh Allen. Who are some of your candidates?
I would say definitely Saquon Barkley.
Saquon, yeah,
without a doubt. I think he's the favorite to it.
Yeah, I would say he's the favorite as well.
Some other good options are.
I mean, maybe Sam Darnold, but
but I can't.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, DJ Moore.
DJ Moore definitely
could potentially. I don't know. I mean, I know the Seahawks took a running back, but I'm not big on Rashad Penny.
No.
I mean, the thing is, a lot of these would be quarterbacks, but half of them are not going to be starting. Actually, there's 5 quarterbacks, so 3/5 of those quarterbacks are not going to be starting. So, those would have been my picks, but obviously they're not starting. And now moving on to defensive rookies. So the top candidates: Bradley Chubb, I think is the favorite. Minka Fitzpatrick, and then Derwin James. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Good options.
Good options. Yeah, I think Bradley Chubb, and that was the one player I'm surprised Cleveland decided not to draft. They decided to draft Denzel Ward. I mean, the Browns, in my opinion, they made better selections in the second round than in the first. They drafted Nick Chubb, who has been a decent in preseason. I think they drafted I think Austin Corbett was his name.
Yes, his name,
yeah. They made smarter decisions in the second round than the first. I would have, like I said, I would have taken Saquon. Even if, was Denzel Ward really even the best defensive player they could have taken?
Yeah, because Minka Fitzpatrick is having an outstanding preseason.
Yeah, I don't get why they didn't take.
Miami got a steal.
Yeah, they got a steal. I think if the Cardinals didn't draft Josh Rosen, they probably would have taken a quarterback, and it would have been whoever got him would have even been more of a bigger steal. But I just, I would have, if I were the Browns, I would have taken Bradley Chubb because you would have put him right up there with Myles Garrett. And now the final awards predictions, the MVP. So my top 3 candidates: Todd Gurley. That's why I did not put him in the Offensive Player of the Year. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, if he stays healthy this year, which I think he will. And then Antonio Brown. Who are some other guys, and what are your thoughts on those picks?
Good options.
Yeah,
I think I'll go with Aaron Rodgers. I think
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, all I'm going to say is, if you're a player and you're on a contender and you win the MVP and you're playing in the Super Bowl, hope you don't win that MVP, because we've seen ever since Kurt Warner won the MVP and won the Super Bowl with the greatest show on turf, there has not been a single NFL MVP that has won the Super Bowl in the same year. It happened to Matt Ryan. It happened to Tom Brady last season. I think it happened to Kurt Warner, actually. That was the season they lost to the Patriots. Rich Gannon, who was with the Raiders, they lost to the Bucks. So it is kind of a coincidence. It's kind of like the Madden curse in a way. It's the MVP's curse, as people like to call it. But Todd Gurley, I just think he's a very dynamic running back, and there's a reason why the Rams are a top contender in football this season. And now, to conclude the video, we're going to go with divisional predictions, starting off in the AFC East. So this has been a division that's been dominated by the Patriots, and even with them on the decline, I still have to go with them number one. I mean, they have Brady and Belichick, and I have them going 12-4. The Bills, I think, will compete for a playoff spot, but I don't think quite yet. I have them as a 9-7 team. The Jets 7-9, and the Dolphins, I have no confidence in them. In fact, I have them as the worst team in the NFL this season at 2-14. So, what are your thoughts on those predictions?
I have to agree with you.
You have to agree, yeah. I mean, obviously, the Pats fan agrees. But what are your thoughts on the other three teams? Like, do you think those are good spots for them in their records?
I mean, the three of them like is really unpredictable. Like, they could be. I don't see them doing I don't see them making the playoffs.
You don't see them making, yeah. I mean, the Bills did, but I don't know. There's still some question marks there, and I mean, listen, the Dolphins made the postseason a couple years ago, and they that's how weak the AFC has been. I think it's going to get better this year, but I just don't see them making the playoffs. I think it's the Patriots division again. Moving on to the AFC North, so this has been a division that's been dominated by the Steelers. The Steelers, I mean, they looked like Super Bowl contenders, but the thing that killed them last season was, unfortunately, the injury to Ryan Shazier and overconfidence. Once they got into the postseason and clinched the first round bye, all that was really on their minds, at least when they were presenting themselves in the media, was we're going to get back to New England and play, and we're going to beat them in Foxborough and prove how great we are. Well, you have to get to them first. And the team they happened to play embarrassed them in the regular season. And guess what? They embarrassed them in the postseason. You got Ben Roethlisberger who's getting up there. Le'Veon Bell, this is probably going to be his final year, considering he just doesn't want to make a deal with the Steelers. I mean, on one hand, I think the Steelers should pay him, but at the same time, the guy has. I think all three of those players have pretty big egos on Pittsburgh. But the other question mark is, and the reason I don't have them as like a top team in the AFC is because of defensively. I mean, Shazier was really their heart and soul of their defense, and it's really unfortunate. There's a likelihood he might never play another down in football, and if I were him, I wouldn't actually. But obviously, they addressed something in the secondary in the first round by getting Terrell Edmonds. So, obviously Pittsburgh, being number one, the Ravens 9-7. I just don't really have that much confidence in Joe Flacco to get back to his one, Super Bowl run. I just don't think Baltimore has the pieces to do that as well. The Bengals, I mean, I just don't get why they, for having a coach for 15 years and not winning one playoff game, why didn't you extended him? And then the Browns. So how many games are the Browns going to win this season? My prediction is 4. Yes, they will win a couple games. Listen, there's nowhere to go but up, and I think Tyrod Taylor is good enough and hopefully healthy enough to win a couple games. So what are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I honestly think the Bengals have the potential to make the playoffs.
You do?
I do.
I mean, but even if they do, I mean, they haven't won a play. They have the longest active playoff win drought right now. They haven't won a game since the early '90s. And it's funny because going into that '90s and the '80s, the Bengals were in a couple Super Bowls, so it just doesn't make any sense. So how many wins are the Browns going to win in your opinion?
I think 6.
Well, all right.
6.
Yeah, that's a maximum, I think, right there. I think they probably. And now moving on to the AFC South, the most competitive division in the AFC. So Jacksonville, because of the defense, because of the running game, even the big question with Blake Bortles and those wide receivers, but I have them as the top team in the AFC, going 13-3. The Texans, the key to them is staying healthy, and so I got J.J. Watt and Deshaun Watson, who are the hearts of both their sides of their team. I have them going 10-6, and then the Titans. There will be a couple teams that are going to be tied for 9-7, but I have the Titans being that last wild card team, and then the Colts, barring Andrew Luck, he can stay healthy, but I think there's still question marks with Indianapolis, but they're going to get Luck back, so I have them as a 500 football team. Well, what are your thoughts on those picks?
I agree with you.
You agree with you. So did you have Jacksonville being the number one contender in the AFC?
They have to be.
Yeah. So I had the Texans and the Titans being playoff teams. What are your thoughts on those?
I think Houston makes it. Yeah, I think Houston makes.
Houston makes it. Why not Tennessee?
I don't feel good about. I just don't feel good about Marcus Mariota, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of been back and forth. I mean, I pick him. I think he is still a dynamic quarterback. They did get some. They did. They got Deion Lewis, and maybe that helps them out. They got Patriots. They decided to become the Patriots in the offseason. They got Malcolm Butler. They got Deion Lewis. I think Isaiah Wynn was in that their first round draft pick. Or no, it was somebody else, but it was somebody that the Patriots were targeting in the draft, and then Mike Vrabel just happened to be won a couple of Super Bowls with the Patriots. So it's Patriots South basically. But yeah, so the final. So what about the Colts? Like, why aren't they? They have Luck back. Why aren't they better than they should be?
The team,
the team around them.
They have to increase the talent. I mean, the defense. I think the defense is definitely improving, but
yeah,
the offensive line seems to be questionable. And other than like T.Y. Hilton and Jack Doyle, they don't seem to have anyone else. So
yeah, I mean, the one thing I'm glad they did in the first round was draft a lineman because that's been a huge concern for them. But I still think they need improvements on it. And then moving on to the AFC West, so this is one of the more interesting divisions. Now, after the Raiders thing, it definitely, thing that happened today, the trade, it definitely changed it a little bit. But the Chargers are the one team that, going into the preseason and going into the season, I was a little bit questionable. But now I'm kind of convinced they're going to be the team that takes the division. They got Derwin James. Phillip Rivers is still playing at a high level. I think the one question mark is tight end position. Both their tight ends got hurt, and they let go of Antonio Gates. And from what I've seen, there's some interest to get him back, but he is 38 years old. So, but what are your thoughts on the Chargers going first? And do you see Antonio Gates potentially coming back to LA?
It would make sense, but
the age though.
I mean, he's probably the best option. I mean,
yeah,
there's no one else I could see them like replacing.
Yeah,
Hunters. So.
Yeah, okay. So moving on with the Chiefs, I think they take a step back. I think it's mostly from Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he's a second-year quarterback. It's going to take him some time to adjust, but I still have them as a 9-7 team. So then it moves on to the Broncos. The Broncos obviously drafted Bradley Chubb, and I think it's really going to improve that. Still elite defense. But the big question I have is we saw what Case Keenum did. He was the surprise quarterback out of nowhere last year. But the problem is the talent that was around him in Minnesota versus the talent that's around him in Denver. Look what he had in Minnesota. He had Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph. He had Delvin Cook for a little bit. He had a decent tandem with running backs with Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray. He had a really great defense. He still has a great defense, but he doesn't have those sides of the offense. And that's why I have them as a 7-9 team. Am I right on this?
They're a bit of an enigma because it all depends on Case Keenum, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just I feel like it's going to be hard, especially in that division, and especially with that offense that he's gonna be able to repeat his standards. And I want to see him succeed, so he proves that it's not a fluke season. But I just feel like it's going to be very hard to accomplish for him. And then with the Raiders, I initially had them being a 7-9 team. I think they're a 5-11 team after that trade. I mean, defensive. I mean, Derek Carr's still a great quarterback, and they still have Amari Cooper. But I mean, Doug Martin they got, he's kind of aging up a bit. Jordy Nelson, is he really going to repeat those statistics in a Aaron Rodgers-less offense? Plus, their defense was already in shambles. I just don't have confidence in the Raiders at all.
Who do they even have now? I mean,
Bruce Irvin.
He's pretty good though.
He's their best player by default. But just other than that, I mean, it's huge because last year I had the Raiders going to the Super Bowl. I had them as the top AFC contender, and that's just not the case. Moving on to the NFC, so the Eagles got the monkey off their back after a very frustrating franchise history. They were able to win Super Bowl 52, where Nick Foles was the NFL MVP, threw 400-plus yards, and beat one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in Tom Brady, and showed in that Super Bowl that he can catch footballs over Tom Brady. Sorry about that. But so Carson Wentz is obviously the quarterback of the future, but he's he's still recovering, and they just announced Nick Foles will start Week 1. But I have them winning the division at 11-5. The Cowboys are sitting. I think they'll do better this year, but I'm kind of there's some question marks with Dak Prescott, and I think the big thing is, okay, Jason Witten's gone and Des Bryant's gone. Who do they have receiver core? Alan Hearns. I just don't have a lot of confidence in the Cowboys. For the Giants, there's nowhere to go but up. But the problem is there's some question marks on a little of question marks on the defensive line, and Eli Manning is getting up there. But I think Saquon improves their team, so I'm gonna have them as a 500 football team. And the Redskins are kind of just there in the division. Instead of keeping Kirk Cousins, they went out and traded for Alex Smith, an aging quarterback, who's not going to have the weapons that he had in Kansas City. They lost their rookie running back who had some potential upside in the preseason, and their running backs are Adrian Peterson. But I have them at 7-9. What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely think Eagles should win the division. They should have no competition, honestly. I mean,
moving on to the NFC North, this is another interesting division. So we saw what Minnesota did last season. We're another big surprise team. Got in the playoffs. Had one of the most spectacular endings in a postseason game with the Stephon Diggs miracle, and then proceeded to get shredded in the NFC Championship game by the Eagles. Had probably one of their best chances in recent history to get to a Super Bowl. All three of their quarterbacks that were on their depth chart last year are gone. Case Keenum went to the Broncos. Teddy Bridgewater went to the Jets, then got traded to the Saints. And then Sam Bradford went to the Cardinals, and they decided to go all in on Kirk Cousins. With that, then you have the Packers, who we saw the thing with the Packers, I'm glad they had their season that they did last season because it proved how vulnerable, how much Aaron Rodgers really is vital to that team, and they need to improve the team around him. So if something like this happens again, maybe they could, be in a good place. And then we have the Bears, great defense already, and getting Khalil Mack just is going to give troubles for all those quarterbacks in that division. But the big question, they're going to live and die by Mitchell Trubisky this year. How well is this guy going to do? And then Detroit, I think I don't really think Detroit got better, but Matthew Stafford's still a pretty good quarterback, so I mean they're not going to be terrible. But with Minnesota, I have them going 11-5 and winning the division. The Packers, I think, will be one of those wild card teams at 10-6. I'm going to take the Bears at 9-7. I don't think they're quite there yet, but this season will be a step in the right direction. And then I'm going to go Detroit. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think Vikings win the division.
The Vikings win the division? Yeah, Packers being a playoff team as a wild card team?
Yeah, I would be shocked. I would be shocked if they don't make it.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts? I mean, since they got Khalil Mack, the Bears might not be a playoff team this year. Are they a playoff team next year, though?
That's a good question. I think it all depends on Mitch, to be honest.
If he has a good season this year, I would, I would definitely put them as a playoff team next year. I think they're going to be moving on to the South. So we got the New Orleans Saints. They had a bit of a rough start in the first few games, but then they translate that into a great. Drew Brees had another great Hall of Fame type season quarterback. The running backs had a really great season with Kamara and Mark Ingram. And a phenomenal defense, who were some of the big defensive pieces on that team? Obviously Marcus Williams, which I'll talk about him in a minute. Who were some of the other pieces on defense? Marshawn Lattimore, yeah. The two big rookies there. The Saints were looking like they were going to be a Super Bowl team, but then the Williams play happened, and it derailed their season. How did the Saints come back from that? I mean, it's not like the Falcons. They got a soup. They don't have the pressure of winning their first Super Bowl. But how do you bounce it back from that?
I think it all depends on how Sean Payton goes by it. it could be used as like motivational.
Yeah, I don't think that loss is really going to derail them, in my opinion. I think they had a good season last year. You have to take the positives out of that. You're young. The team around Drew Brees is young, and I think you look at it. You got to the divisional round. You're like, okay, let's take the next step this season. So, but then you have Atlanta. The big scary thing is what's happened with the whole Julio Jones thing. You drafted Calvin Ridley, and you're thinking, okay, we're going to have a great wide receiver duo. Now Calvin Ridley potentially could be looking at as a replacement for Julio Jones. How do the Falcons approach the Julio Jones situation?
Just give him a new contract, but if they do that, they'll be in cap hell. I mean, they won't be able to like sign other players like Jerry Garrett.
Yeah,
the upcoming players like Deion Jones and Keanu O'Neal. So
I mean,
they did balance it.
I think the Falcons are a playoff team this year at 10-6, but the thing is that's derailed them. They could have been on another playoff run or another Super Bowl run last year. Look at what's killed them in the last two postseasons: play calling. Kyle Shanahan's play calling against in the midway through the third quarter against the Patriots. They were running the ball very successfully, and they just decided, all right, let's go away from that. Let's not give the ball to Devontae Freeman. And then that goal line stand against the Eagles, Steve Sarkisian, three straight passes. You were on like the inside the 5. Why didn't you run at least once or twice? Break it up a little bit. They need to improve on that, in my opinion. You need to improve on the play calling. But still that. Carolina, they were a playoff team last year. I see them regressing this year. I mean, Cam Newton could be great, but I don't know. I just don't feel it. I think they'll 500 football team, but I just don't feel it with Carolina. So I mean, what are your do you think they regress this year?
Yeah, I think they do. I think it depends how Cam Newton plays. I mean, I believe that he has like the talent to be great, but he seems like he doesn't like work on his craft too much.
Yeah, and then Tampa Bay. So Jameis Winston, this is probably the last season for him to prove that he's their quarterback. Their franchise quarterback. And then after the whole Uber groping thing, he suspended the first 3 games of the season. Tampa Bay in the last 2 seasons was a team that could potentially surprise people. And now they just, I feel like I just feel like that's just not going to happen this season. NFC West, the final regular season prediction as far as the divisions are going. So the Rams obviously were the off-season champions this season. Let's see, who did they get? Ndamukong Suh, Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib, Brandon Cooks. I mean, they just went out and were great. They had a surprise season last year. They still got Jared Goff. They still have Todd Gurley. They still have Aaron Donald. They extended him. You have all these great players. But the thing about it is, I talked about overconfidence with Pittsburgh last season. The Rams could potentially be a little too overconfident. And some people are starting to. I don't think they're comparing them to the quote-unquote dream team of the 2011 Philadelphia Eagles, but that could be a little bit. I mean, they're expected to be the top team in the NFC, and I have them being 14-2. But what is going to be the key for them to, meet these expectations, especially for a young team like the Rams?
One game at a time.
Yeah, don't be overconfident. Take one game at a time. I definitely agree with that. So the Niners, even though a lot of people want to pick them as a playoff team, the one thing that unfortunately happened today, they lost the running back they spent a lot of money on, Jerick McKinnon. He's out for the year with the torn ACL, so obviously that brings a weakness into their running game. I had them 10-6, but I don't think they're quite there yet, even with Jimmy Garoppolo. They're almost there, but not quite. I feel like Atlanta just has a little bit more experience to be a playoff team. So, what are your thoughts on that? Between those teams contending, what team is likely to be a playoff team? San Francisco or Atlanta?
Atlanta,
yeah. So, moving on to the Arizona Cardinals. They're the AFC version of the Houston Texans. It's all about staying healthy, and I think the one thing, obviously, having Sam Bradford as your quarterback, can the guy stay healthy? You drafted Josh Rosen. You gotta, you're hoping, you don't have, he doesn't see that much action for his development. They got David Johnson's coming back healthy this year, but he's in a contract year. He needs to stay healthy if he wants to be the franchise running back for the Cardinals. The Cardinals still have a great defense, even though they dropped the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, who, in my opinion, I don't think it's that big of a loss because they last year they drafted his replacement, Buda Baker, and I think he's going to be really good in that defense. They still have Chandler Jones. They still have Patrick Peterson, who's probably the best. Those are possibly the two best players in their position. I think the Cardinals are basically this season. It's a rebuilding with a new coach. I think they're on par with last year's team, 8-8. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. They have the potential to do good, but yeah, it depends on health.
Yeah, it depends on health. And listen, I think wide receiver, there's some question marks there. Is Christian Kirk going to be good? Larry Fitzgerald, I think, will have another great year. He's just continually a very consistent wide receiver, even at the age of 35. And to be honest, for me, as a fan of football, considering how great he is on and off the field, I don't think anybody wants to see him retire. And the other thing is he displays loyalty, which is something that's rare in sports these days. And that's it for my 2018 NFL season thoughts and predictions. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks Durgesh for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at BabyLaser96. Is there any social media accounts that you want to plug right now?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay. So stay tuned for my Week 1 picks. And also, if you're a fan of my baseball videos, I just dropped recently on my 2018 Major League Baseball season August recap. So see that, a link of that in the description below. So thanks everybody for watching, and see me in my Week 1 picks video.